The morning sun bathed the quiet countryside in a warm golden glow as Lan Qiren and Lan Xichen stood before the entrance to the farm, neither of them speaking for a long moment. Their attention was fixed on the sight before them, quietly taking in every detail. The compound wall was almost hidden beneath a tapestry of climbing plants. At first glance, the abundance of greenery appeared delightfully untamed, as though nature had simply been left to claim the walls for itself. Yet, the longer one looked, the more deliberate the arrangement became. Every climber had been guided by carefully placed wooden supports, each vine encouraged to weave in a particular direction so that none competed with another for space. What seemed like pleasant disorder was, in truth, a patient work of careful hands, balancing freedom with gentle guidance. The wooden gate served as the heart of the display. Thick jasmine vines had climbed over its frame, arching gracefully from one side to the other until they formed a living canopy above the entrance. Hundreds of delicate white blossoms clustered among glossy green leaves, each flower fresh with life. They had bloomed only the evening before, their petals still pristine, their fragrance rich and lingering in the cool morning air. The scent drifted lazily on the breeze, soft yet unmistakable. It carried none of the refined incense of the cloud recesses, nor the sharp sweetness of expensive perfumes favored by noble households. Instead, it was the honest fragrance of flowers blooming where they had been planted, welcoming every visitor before they had even stepped inside. A pair of butterflies danced between the blossoms, disturbed only briefly by the gentle rustle of leaves stirred by the wind. Sunlight filtered through the woven vines, scattering shifting patches of light and shadow across the weathered wooden gate below. Lan Xichen's eyes lingered on the living arch, a faint smile touching his lips. "It is beautiful." Lan Xichen remained silent. His gaze swept slowly over the climbing vines, the carefully positioned supports, the measured spacing between each plant, and the effortless harmony they created together. What first appeared unrestrained gradually revealed itself to be anything but. Every vine had been given room to grow without overwhelming its neighbors, each carefully encouraged toward its own place until the entire wall resembled a single living painting. It was neither the rigid precision of the cloud recesses nor the wild abandon of an untouched forest. It existed somewhere between the two. Artistic, natural, peaceful. The entrance did not announce wealth or prestige. It offered no imposing gates, no polished stone, no carved sect insignias proclaiming status. Instead, it greeted its visitors with flowers, fragrance, and quiet life as though inviting them to leave the cultivation world beyond the gate and enter a place where time moved at the pace of the seasons. Stepping through the jasmine-covered gate, Lan Qiren and Lan Xichen found themselves greeted by a scene that seemed to stretch endlessly before them. The farm was far more expansive than either of them had imagined. A broad stone pathway led deeper into the property, winding gently through the landscape without disturbing its natural rhythm. On either side, rows of trees stood in quiet harmony, each one carefully spaced so that their branches had room to spread without crowding their neighbors. There was no single variety. Flowering trees displayed blossoms in soft shades of white, pink, and pale purple, their petals drifting lazily upon the breeze. Fruit trees stood among them, their branches already heavy with ripening peaches, pears, plums, and persimmons. Here and there stood stately shade trees whose only purpose seemed to be offering shelter from the afternoon sun, their broad canopies casting patches of cool shade across the path. Although Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian had settled on this farm only 2 years ago, none of the trees bore the appearance of recent plantings. Their trunks were thick and sturdy, bark weathered with age, roots deeply anchored into the earth as though they had stood here for decades. Lan Xichen's gaze lingered on one particularly mature pear tree. Spirit energy. Lan Qiren gave a slight nod. It would explain their growth. There was no sign of forceful cultivation techniques or reckless acceleration that exhausted the plants. Instead, the trees radiated quiet vitality, their spiritual energy settled and stable. Whoever had nurtured them had done so with extraordinary patience, guiding their growth rather than compelling it. Beyond the rows of trees lay another layer of cultivation. Medium-sized shrubs and orderly garden beds filled the spaces between the orchard and the open fields. Every patch served its own purpose. Leafy vegetables flourished beside climbing beans supported by wooden trellises. Bushes laden with berries bent beneath the weight of their ripened fruit, while fragrant herbs and seasonings grew in carefully marked rows, releasing their scents whenever the breeze brushed against them. Chives, ginger, garlic, peppers, and countless other useful plants were arranged not merely for convenience, but with thoughtful consideration for their growing conditions. Nothing appeared random, yet nothing felt rigid. Each plant seemed to occupy the place where it naturally belonged. As they continued walking, the gardens gradually gave way to wide, open fields. The farmland had been divided into neat sections, each dedicated to a different crop. Some plots shimmered with young rice, while others held rows of vegetables in varying stages of growth. Here and there, clusters of flowering plants bloomed among the crops. Bright marigolds, cosmos, lavender, and other blossoms introduced splashes of color between the sea of green. Lan Xichen observed them with quiet curiosity. For pollination, Lan Xichen followed his gaze, watching bees drift lazily from flower to flower before disappearing among the vegetables. A practical arrangement. It was efficient, beautiful, alive. Farther ahead stood a modest farmhouse. It was neither grand nor elaborate. Built of timber and stone, it possessed a quiet warmth that blended naturally into its surroundings. Smoke curled gently from a chimney, carrying the faint aroma of firewood. Around it stood several smaller sheds scattered throughout the property, each constructed for a different purpose. Some were clearly used for storing farming tools. Others housed harvested vegetables awaiting sorting, while a few appeared dedicated to grain and animal feed. The entire farm breathed with quiet industry. Life moved at an unhurried pace. As they walked deeper into the property, its residents paid them little mind. A pair of white rabbits darted from beneath a berry bush, bounding effortlessly across the path before disappearing beneath another cluster of shrubs. Chickens scratched industriously at the earth, clucking among themselves as they searched for insects hidden beneath the loose soil. A proud rooster watched over his flock from atop a weathered fence post before announcing his presence with a triumphant crow. Not far away, several goats grazed lazily upon a grassy slope, occasionally lifting their heads to regard the visitors with mild curiosity before returning to their meal without concern. The farm was peaceful, not because it was silent, but because every sound belonged. The rustle of leaves overhead, the buzzing of bees among the flowers, the distant bleating of goats, the soft clucking of hens, the whisper of wind moving through ripened grain. Together they formed a melody unlike the solemn stillness of the cloud recesses, a quieter kind of harmony, born not from strict discipline, but from the gentle rhythm of life itself. By the time they reached the farmhouse, the surroundings had fallen into a comfortable stillness. Lan Xichen stepped onto the wooden porch and knocked lightly against the door. Wei Wangji. Only silence answered him. He waited a moment before calling again, his voice carrying gently across the yard. Still, there was no response. Just as Lan Xichen frowned slightly, wondering where the two of them had gone, a burst of bright, unrestrained laughter drifted through the air. It came from somewhere behind the house. Wei Wuxian. The sound was so full of amusement that Lan Xichen found himself smiling instinctively. The two of them followed the laughter around the side of the farmhouse, passing a row of drying herbs hanging beneath the eaves before the view suddenly opened. Behind the house lay a lotus pond. It was neither grand nor sprawling like the lakes surrounding Lotus Pier, but modest in size, perfectly suited to the farm. Broad lotus leaves floated peacefully upon the clear water, their emerald discs overlapping one another until only patches of the pond reflected the sky above. Pink and white blossoms rose proudly from among the leaves, gently swaying whenever a breeze passed over the water. Extending a short distance into the pond was a wooden platform, at the end of which stood a simple gazebo. Its roof cast a cool shade over the seating beneath, making it an inviting place to escape the afternoon sun. Wei Wuxian occupied it entirely. He sat with one leg folded beneath him and the other dangling lazily over the edge of the platform, one hand gripping the railing as though it were the only thing preventing him from falling over. Not from danger, from laughter. His shoulders shook uncontrollably as another peal of laughter escaped him, bright enough to send a nearby pair of birds fluttering from the reeds. Lan Zhan. He barely managed the name between breaths. I only said I wanted some lotus seeds. Another fit of laughter interrupted him. I didn't tell you to wage war against the entire pond. Standing several paces away, knee-deep in the water, was Lan Wangji. His outer robes had long since been removed and folded with characteristic neatness upon the wooden platform. Dressed only in his inner robes, he had rolled his sleeves high above his forearms and folded his trousers carefully to his knees before entering the pond. Even so, it had clearly not been enough. Dark mud coated his calves where he had sunk into the soft bed beneath the water. Smears of the same earthy brown marked his knees and the edges of his robes, while droplets of water clung to loose strands of hair that had escaped his ribbon. One hand held several freshly cut lotus stems, their heavy seed pods still intact, while the other steadied himself against the shifting mud beneath his feet. For someone who normally carried himself with impeccable elegance, the sight was unexpectedly ordinary. Lan Wangji glanced toward Wei Wuxian. I retrieved them. Wei Wuxian looked at the handful of lotus pods. I can see that. Then his gaze dropped to Lan Wangji's mud-covered robes. Oh, Lan Zhan. His lips twitched. He truly tried to compose himself. For precisely 3 heartbeats. Then he failed completely. Another burst of laughter echoed across the pond. You jumped in immediately. Wei Wuxian wiped the corner of his eye, still laughing. I was only mentioning that fresh lotus seeds sounded nice. I thought you'd use a hook. He pointed accusingly toward Lan Wangji. You looked at the pond for 1 second, and just dash. Wei Wuxian mimicked an exaggerated dive with both hands. Went straight in. Lan Wangji regarded him with complete composure despite the mud splattered halfway up his legs. There was no hook here. Wei Wuxian laughed harder. I know, there wasn't. That's exactly why this is funny. Lan Wangji lowered his eyes briefly to the lotus stems in his hand before looking back at him. You wanted lotus seeds. The answer was spoken with such simple sincerity that it only made the situation worse. Wei Wuxian bent forward, one hand clutching his stomach as helpless laughter overtook him once more. From where they stood beneath the shade of the trees, Lan Xichen quietly watched the familiar exchange. A soft chuckle escaped him. Beside him, Lan Qiren remained perfectly silent. His eyes lingered on his nephew standing knee-deep in a lotus pond, robes rolled, hands stained with mud, holding a bundle of lotus stems as though there were nothing unusual about the situation at all. It was an image that would have been utterly unimaginable only a few years ago. Yet now, Lan Wangji wore it as naturally as if he had belonged there all along. Lan Qiren's gaze lingered upon his youngest nephew. The sight before him was so utterly unlike the Lan Wangji he had known for decades that, for a fleeting moment, the present blurred into the past. 2 years ago, that had been the last time he had seen Wangji within the walls of the cloud recesses. It had been shortly after Lan Xichen finally emerged from his 3 years of secluded meditation. The entire sect had breathed a collective sigh of relief. With their sect leader returned, the burden Lan Wangji had carried alone as acting sect leader and chief cultivator had finally come to an end. Lan Xichen had believed everything would gradually return to normal. Instead, that very day, Lan Wangji had entered his study. Wei Wuxian had followed a respectful step behind him, remaining silent. Wei Wuxian had followed a respectful step behind him, remaining silent. Without hesitation, Lan Wangji had knelt and spoken calmly. Uncle, I wish to leave the cloud recesses. The words had struck Lan Qiren harder than any blade ever could. Leave? Alan, leaving the cloud recesses? His shock had almost instantly transformed into anger. His eyes had found the person standing behind Wangji. Wei Wuxian. Who else could have planted such an absurd thought in his nephew's mind? You dash. His voice had risen before reason could restrain it. So this was your intention all along? After everything, you would still lead Wangji astray? Is separating him from his family not enough? Must you also take him away from his home? Wei Wuxian had not defended himself. He had merely lowered his eyes and remained silent. It was Lan Wangji who spoke. No. One word. Firm. Steady. Enough to silence the room. It is my decision. Lan Qiren had stared at him in disbelief. Wangji, Wei Ying has spent months convincing me to remain. Lan Wangji's voice remained even, but there was a weariness within it that Lan Qiren had never heard before. He asked me to stay. He told me my family still needed me. He told me the cloud recesses was my home. A heavy silence settled over the room. And yet, Lan Wangji lifted his eyes. Uncle once again blamed him before asking a single question. The disappointment in those pale eyes was unmistakable. It hurt far more than anger ever could. Lan Wangji continued quietly. That is precisely why I am leaving. Lan Xichen found himself unable to answer. For 3 years, Lan Wangji said, Wei remained in the cloud recesses because of me. He taught the younger disciples whenever they sought his guidance. He accepted night hunts whenever the sect required additional cultivators. He restored talismans, repaired arrays, offered advice, and never once refused when asked. His gaze never wavered. What did he receive in return? Silence. He was told he was misleading the disciples. He was watched. His every action was scrutinized. Every mistake, however small, became proof that he did not belong. His voice remained calm, but beneath that calm lay years of restrained frustration. The duties he fulfilled were treated as obligations. The help he offered was expected. His efforts were ignored. Not once was he thanked. Lan Xichen instinctively opened his mouth. Lan Wangji continued before he could speak. When brother entered seclusion, Wei visited him more than anyone. He refused to give up. He spoke to him day after day. He was the one who finally persuaded brother to step outside. Lan Wangji's hands tightened almost imperceptibly upon his robes. And yet, today uncle still believes he is the reason I wish to leave. His voice grew softer. I have endured these 3 years because this is my home. I fulfilled father's responsibilities. I fulfilled brother's responsibilities. I fulfilled the responsibilities of chief cultivator. I remained because my family needed me. A long silence followed. Now, Lan Wangji finally looked toward Wei Wuxian. I wish to live peacefully with the person I love. His gaze returned to Lan Qiren. I cannot do so here. Not while Wei remains someone the elders merely tolerate. Not while he is confined by rules that were never written for him. Not while every action he takes is watched by those waiting for him to fail. For the first time in his life, Lan Wangji's patience with his family had reached its end. I am grateful for everything the Lan Clan has given me, but I will not ask Wei to spend the rest of his life proving that he deserves to stand beside me. The room had fallen utterly silent. Then came the words that Lan Qiren had never imagined hearing from his nephew. I hereby announce my defection from the Gusu Lan clan. Even now, 2 years later, Lan Qiren could still remember how the air itself had seemed to freeze. Had Lan Xichen not intervened, had he not calmly spoken to both of them long into the night, Lan Wangji would have walked away from the cloud recesses no longer bearing the name Lan. Instead, he had left with his family name intact. Lan Qiren's gaze slowly settled upon the familiar white forehead ribbon still resting neatly across his nephew's brow. It was the only visible connection that remained between Lan Wangji and the home he had once known. 2 years. 2 full years had passed since that day. Not once had Lan Wangji returned to the cloud recesses. Standing knee-deep in the pond, Lan Wangji was about to reach for another lotus stem when he felt it. 2 familiar presences. His movements stilled almost instinctively. Slowly, he lifted his head. Beneath the shade of a broad tree stood Lan Qiren and Lan Xichen, quietly watching them. Following Lan Wangji's line of sight, Wei Wuxian turned around as well. The moment he recognized their visitors, the carefree laughter that had echoed across the farm only seconds ago faded away. The brilliant smile remained, but it softened into the courteous expression Wei Wuxian so often wore around the Lan clan. Lan Wangji's grip tightened around the lotus stems. His mood immediately soured. Wei had only begun laughing like that after they came here. Within these walls, no one measured his words against 3,000 rules. No one watched him with suspicion. No one waited for him to make a mistake so they could quietly confirm the opinions they already held of him. Here, Wei simply existed. He laughed when he wished to laugh. He spoke without restraint. He wandered barefoot through the fields, argued with stubborn chickens, complained about vegetables, and spent entire afternoons lying beneath fruit trees without worrying about propriety. This farm had given him something Lan Wangji had long wished for: peace. And now, that laughter had disappeared the instant the past walked through their gate. Lan Wangji disliked it. When he and Wei had left the cloud recesses 2 years ago, nothing had needed to be said aloud. His family understood. This place was not merely a farm. It was their sanctuary, a home built with their own hands, far removed from sect politics, expectations, resentment, and judgment. A place where the two of them could slowly heal from everything they had endured over the past 2 decades. That was why no one had come. Not Lan Qiren, not Lan Xichen, not a single elder. For 2 years, Lan Wangji had not returned to the cloud recesses. And in return, the cloud recesses had respected the boundary he had drawn. Only the junior disciples occasionally found excuses to visit, arriving in cheerful little groups that followed Wei Wuxian around like ducklings while claiming they had simply been passing by. Everyone else had stayed away. Then, why were they here now? Lan Xichen was the first to move. His gentle smile remained unchanged as he walked toward the pond. Wuxian, Wangji. Wei Wuxian blinked once before recovering his usual easy smile, almost immediately. Xichen, Master Lan. He rose from the gazebo and stepped down onto the wooden platform before offering them a respectful bow, as though he had not been doubled over with laughter only moments ago. Lan Wangji climbed out of the pond soon after. Mud clung stubbornly to his legs and robes, but he scarcely noticed it. Uncle, brother. His greeting was quiet, respectful, and unmistakably restrained. Without waiting for further conversation, he turned away. A wooden basin stood beside the platform, already filled with fresh water. Lan Wangji rinsed the mud from his legs and hands before drying them carefully. He dressed with the same meticulous precision he always possessed, slipping back into his outer robes, smoothing every fold until not a crease remained out of place. Only then did he return. By that time, Wei Wuxian had already guided their guests into the gazebo overlooking the Lotus Pond. A low wooden table occupied its center. The kettle rested over a small charcoal stove, the water already beginning to heat. Wei Wuxian crouched beside a cabinet, sorting through small ceramic jars before selecting several dried herbs and a tin of tea leaves. I'll prepare something fresh. Lan Wangji quietly reached for the tea set. I will. Wei Wuxian looked up. All right. His smile returned, softer this time. Then I'll bring something to eat. Without waiting for an answer, he disappeared toward the farmhouse, leaving the brothers and their uncle together. Lan Wangji measured the tea leaves into the warmed teapot with practiced movements. The kettle began to whisper as the water reached its boil. Steam curled gently into the afternoon air. No one spoke. Lan Xichen's gaze wandered beyond the gazebo, taking in the Lotus Pond, the orchards stretching into the distance, the carefully divided fields, the grazing animals, and the farmhouse nestled comfortably among them. Lan Xichen did the same. His eyes lingered on every corner of the property, silently observing the life Lan Wangji had built for himself. Neither questioned it, neither praised it. They simply looked. Lan Wangji poured the hot water over the tea leaves. The fragrance slowly unfurled between them. Still, silence remained. Only after several quiet minutes did footsteps approach from the farmhouse once more. Wei Wuxian returned carrying a large wooden tray. Freshly steamed buns, sliced seasonal fruit, roasted sweet potatoes, lotus seed cakes, and several small dishes of preserved vegetables had been arranged neatly upon it. He set the tray gently onto the table beside the tea. By then, the tea had finished brewing. For cups sat before them, delicate wisps of steam rising into the still afternoon air. Yet despite the welcoming meal, the fragrant tea, and the peaceful surroundings, not a single word had been spoken. The only sounds that filled the gazebo were the rustling lotus leaves, the distant clucking of chickens, and the gentle breeze moving through the trees. Wei Wuxian quietly took his place beside Lan Wangji. Without a word, he lifted the teapot and filled each cup with freshly brewed tea before placing a small plate of steamed buns, sliced fruit, lotus seed cakes, and roasted sweet potatoes within easy reach of their guests. Please. His voice was gentle, carrying none of its usual playful lilt. Lan Xichen accepted the cup with a smile. Thank you. Lan Qiren inclined his head in acknowledgement. The four of them began their meal in silence. It was the first time since settling on the farm that silence had accompanied their table. Ordinarily, every meal was filled with Wei Wuxian's endless chatter stories about stubborn vegetables, complaints about mischievous rabbits stealing cabbages, debates over whether Lan Wangji's tea or his own wine paired better with freshly harvested lotus roots. Even Lan Wangji's quiet replies were enough to keep the atmosphere warm. Today, only the soft clink of porcelain disturbed the stillness. Wei Wuxian sensed the tension as clearly as anyone. For once, he made no attempt to dispel it. He quietly poured more tea whenever a cup emptied, occasionally placing another snack on a Lan Wangji's plate out of habit, but otherwise remained silent. Time stretched on. At last, it was Lan Xichen who broke the silence. His voice was calm, carrying the same gentle warmth it always had. Wangji, Wuxian. The two of them looked up. I have come today because I wish to personally tell you some happy news. A faint smile spread across his face. I am getting married. For a heartbeat. Both Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian simply stared at him. The surprise was genuine. It swept away the cautious restraint that had settled over the gazebo since the Lan clan's arrival. Lan Wangji was the first to respond. Brother. His usually composed expression softened ever so slightly. Congratulations. Wei Wuxian's eyes widened before a broad smile immediately broke across his face. Qiren, that's wonderful. His enthusiasm returned almost instantly, as natural as breathing. Who is the lucky person? And when is the wedding? Lan Xichen chuckled quietly, relieved to see Wei Wuxian smiling again. Her name is Chu Lanyue. She is the eldest daughter of the Chu clan of Gusu. It is a small cultivation clan. We became acquainted over the past year through discussions concerning reconstruction efforts and cooperation between the smaller sections. There was unmistakable fondness in his eyes as he spoke. She is kind, patient, and possesses remarkable wisdom despite never seeking recognition for it. Wei Wuxian listened attentively, his smile growing warmer. I'm happy for you, Qiren. He truly meant it. Lan Xichen had lost too much. He had carried the burdens of the Lan clan for years, suffered through betrayal and guilt, and then spent 3 years watching his own brother shoulder responsibilities that should have been his. Seeing him speak of someone with such quiet happiness, Wei Wuxian found himself genuinely relieved. And when is the wedding? In 8 months. Wei Wuxian immediately began calculating. 8 months. His gaze drifted unconsciously toward the fields beyond the gazebo. The summer vegetables will have finished by then. The autumn harvest should be coming in. The pear orchard will be ready. And if we prepare another section now, the chrysanthemums should bloom at just the right time. He looked back at Lan Xichen with bright eyes. Qiren, then leave the flowers, fruits, and vegetables to us. Our harvest has been much better than expected this year. If we plan the planting properly over the next several months, we can provide everything you'll need for the wedding banquet. There'll be fresh seasonal vegetables, fruit, flowers for decoration, whatever you need. Lan Xichen's smile deepened. That would make us very happy. He looked between Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji. The offer had come so naturally, without hesitation, without resentment, as though helping prepare for his wedding was simply another joy to be shared. Yet, he also noticed something else. Neither of them had responded to the invitation itself. Neither had said they would attend. They had congratulated him. They had offered the farm's harvest. But not once had either of them answered the one request he had come here to make. Lan Xichen said nothing. There was still time. 8 months remained before the wedding. He was patient enough to wait for their answer. The gazebo fell silent once more. Lan Xichen did not press them for an answer. Instead, he quietly sipped his tea, content to let the silence settle naturally. It was Lan Qiren who finally broke it. Wangji, Wei Wuxian. Both men looked toward him. For a long moment, Lan Qiren remained silent, as though carefully choosing words that had taken him 2 years to find. I was wrong. The admission was simple. Yet hearing those words from the old Lan elder was enough to make even Wei Wuxian pause. I never once tried to understand Wei Wuxian's circumstances. His weathered eyes shifted toward Wei Wuxian. I judged you before I understood you. Time and again. Then they turned to Lan Wangji. And I failed to understand you as well, Wangji. I have spent my entire life teaching the Lan clan rules. His voice carried neither pride nor authority now, only quiet regret. I taught our disciples to seek truth before passing judgment. I taught them to examine themselves before criticizing others. I taught them to be impartial. A faint, bitter smile touched his lips. And yet, I repeatedly failed to uphold those very principles myself. The gazebo remained utterly still. Lan Qiren slowly rose from his seat. I did not come today to ask you to return. I know that ship has long since sailed. nor did I come expecting forgiveness. His expression was calm. I know there are words and actions that cannot simply be erased with an apology. No amount of regret can change what has already happened. He looked directly at both of them. But I wish to begin somewhere. With deliberate care, Lan Xichen straightened his robes. Then he bowed. Not the perfunctory inclination of an elder toward a junior. Not the formal courtesy between sect leaders. A proper bow. An apology offered with all the sincerity he possessed. I am sorry. Wei Wuxian's eyes widened. Master Lan. Almost instinctively, he sprang to his feet and hurried around the table, reaching out before Lan Qiren could complete the bow. Please. There is no need for this. His hand stopped the elder gently. You don't have to bow to me. Lan Qiren slowly straightened. Neither of them spoke further. Wei Wuxian glanced instinctively toward Lan Wangji. Lan Wangji had remained seated, silent. His expression revealed nothing, just as Lan Qiren himself had said. An apology now could not erase everything that had happened. It could not undo years of suspicion. It could not return the countless moments when Wei Ying had been judged before being heard. It could not restore the years Lan Wangji had silently endured while watching the person he loved treated as though he were forever standing outside the Lan Clan. Nor did it change his decision. He would never return to live within the cloud recesses. Lan Qiren understood that silence. There was disappointment, but no surprise. A weary smile crossed his face. I understand. He drew a slow breath before speaking again. I will not ask you to return. His gaze rested gently upon Lan Wangji. But come to your brother's wedding. That is all I ask of you. Nothing more. No conditions. No expectations. Only a request from an uncle. Lan Wangji lowered his eyes. Silence stretched between them once again. His thoughts drifted to the years before everything had changed. When he was young, his brother had been the one who held his hand, who played the guqin with him, who quietly shielded him whenever uncle's lessons became too severe. After their father's passing, Lan Xichen had been the closest thing he had to a parent. Then came years of responsibilities, years of burdens, years in which both brothers silently protected the Lan Clan in their own ways. Much had happened between them all. Too much. But his brother had never stopped reaching for him. Lan Wangji finally looked up. We will come. Lan Xichen's eyes brightened almost imperceptibly. Then Lan Wangji added quietly, but only for the wedding. The smile on Lan Xichen's face deepened. That is enough. It truly was. No one present believed that a single apology could mend years of fractured trust. Relationships did not heal so easily. But every bridge began with a single stone. Today, the first had finally been laid. The Lan Clan did not leave immediately. Instead, they remained for the rest of the day. The conversation gradually became easier. Wei Wuxian's natural liveliness slowly returned as the afternoon wore on. He cheerfully led Lan Xichen around the farm, proudly showing off the orchards, explaining which vegetables would be ready for harvest first, complaining about rabbits that insisted on stealing his cabbages, and enthusiastically describing plans for expanding the herb gardens before winter. To Lan Xichen's quiet amusement, even Lan Qiren eventually found himself listening. They wandered through rows of fruit trees heavy with promise, paused beside flowering fields humming with bees, visited the sheds where harvests were carefully stored, and watched goats grazing lazily beneath the afternoon sun. There was no grandeur, no prestige, no sect meetings, no politics, only earth, plants, animals, and two people who had built a peaceful life with their own hands. As evening settled over the farm, painting the sky in warm shades of amber and gold, Lan Qiren found himself breathing more easily than he had in years. Perhaps this place truly had been built for healing, not only for Wangji and Wei Wuxian, but, in time, for the family they had left behind as well. Fields of Serenity is the beginning of our farm WangXian story, a peaceful life after the cultivation world, where healing happens one ordinary day at a time. If you'd like to follow their life on the farm, you'll find more of their story in the WangXian shorts on this channel.